Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
The news just keeps getting stranger. I mean, it really does. And it all seems to come around full circle. Everything gets connected. And even though we have this flood of information and all these revelations right in front of us, it seems the majority of people still can't make sense of it and figure stuff out, or at least focus on what is important. And that is because there is this massive flood of information all the time. Tonight, we're going to talk about this biolab raid in Las Vegas. And it's weird because the connections around this thing extend all the way to China and to Canada. And it makes me think about a certain group of birds that we've been talking about here extensively. Now, let me be clear. I am not alleging that there is a direct connection between that bird farm and has been going on with this biolab specifically in Las Vegas. But I'm going to show you similarities and things that are going to raise red flags tonight, because it's weird. All the stuff surrounding all of this stuff is weird. Also tonight, in other news, and I can't believe this is not getting more attention, the cause of death of Alex Preddy has been released by the coroner. It's right on the death certificate. I'll show you. It is exactly what we saw and exactly what we were told not to think. But we're still being told not to think. But I'm going to show you tonight. Also, just other stuff that's weird. And then I'm going to wrap things up tonight, I think, with a little bit of reflection again that might just help us keep things in perspective. So stay with me. That we have a lot to unpack tonight. I can't believe how much we have to talk about. It's just a never-ending flood right now of weird news. But it's real. And we'll try to get you closer to the truth on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so let's just dig right into this story tonight because I've been digging into it fairly extensively since first hearing about it, and new developments tonight into the investigation into this illegal biolab in Las Vegas. This raid was executed over the weekend. It started early Saturday, and details publicly announced and updated today. Or actually, there were updates. Let me just turn this off. There were updates filed Monday, more updates today. And there, that's the end of that. Sorry, I asked people not to call during the broadcast, and they do anyway. Of course, right as soon as we begin. So let me regroup my thoughts. Raid on this suspected illegal biolab, all kinds of stuff found there in Las Vegas over the weekend. There was an update on the information Monday, another update today, because that lab in Las Vegas directly related to a previous biolab investigation and related to something going on in Canada, related to some stuff going on in China. So this raid took place at a residential home on Sugar Springs Drive in Northeast Las Vegas, near East Washington Avenue and North Hollywood Boulevard. You had the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department there, FBI, including the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and the Clark County Fire Department, hazmat teams. And there were other state and local partners. This all because a tip came in, initially possibly related to some sort of a bylaw or a code violation municipally. It led to a search warrant, and then the raid spanned from January 31st, Saturday, into like yesterday. And there's still activity there. And now they've returned to the scene of this other location, which was part of another raid like some time ago in, I think it was Fresno, the Reedley. So inside this home, which was basically a garage, investigators discovered what appeared to be a possible biological laboratory setup. Refrigerators, freezers, vials with unknown liquids. Local residents there now very concerned about possible health risks. Over 1,000 pieces of evidence, samples collected, over 1,000 biological samples. They've now been sent off for testing to determine if they contain infectious agents or hazardous materials, and there is absolutely evidence that that is the case. Now, they're saying there's no immediate threat to the public, but here's the thing. The property manager was arrested. His name, 55-year-old Ori Solomon. But here's the real twist. The owner of the residence has been identified as being a man linked to the prior case. This person is a Chinese national, has several different names. David He, Jesse Zhu. Now, he's already in federal custody related to this illegal biolab case in Reedley, California, which is, I think, near Fresno. And this goes back to 2023. Now let's start it off here tonight with this report, this local news report on the over weekend raid, which is still an ongoing investigation. This from ABC 30 Action News.
Local and federal officials in Nevada confirm a connection between a suspected biological lab found in a Las Vegas home and the illegal Reedley facility discovered by a code enforcement officer in December of 2022. That lab was suspected of receiving money from Chinese banks and housing thousands of samples of potentially harmful pathogens. Action News reporter Vincent Camarillo joins us now from the live desk with the latest on this stunning new development. Vincent?
Margot, just yesterday, our cameras captured local and federal officials pulling evidence from the building that once housed that illegal operation. Investigators now saying the homes in Las Vegas held concerning similarities to that in Reedley. Meanwhile, state lawmakers are calling for changes they say should have been made years ago.
A shocking connection out of Nevada, now putting the spotlight back on an illegal operation that shook the Central Valley more than 3 years ago.
As our investigation progressed, we determined that the home was owned by the same individual connected to a prior illegal biolab investigation in Reedley, California that occurred in 2023.
The FBI and Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department revealing Monday Chinese national David He, operator of the illegal Reedley Biolab at the center of that 2023 congressional investigation, is now linked to a similar operation in Las Vegas. Investigators searched 2 Las Vegas homes over the weekend, discovering more than 1,000 samples of what they call illegal medical-type biological research materials, later taking them for testing.
We recognize that the public is seeking clarity. What were they testing for? What possibilities are being considered? However, as the sheriff mentioned, in cases like this, our process relies on being slow and methodical.
55-year-old Ori Solomon was identified as the property manager and arrested on scene. David He is said to be the owner, but not a primary suspect. He has remained in federal custody since 2023. His attorney telling Action News he has no connection to this latest case.
Never mentioned anything about Las Vegas properties or any other properties to me about storing any kind of materials or anything of that nature.
Investigators have not determined what exactly was found in the Las Vegas lab, but say similarities to discoveries made in Reedley raised red flags.
The nature of that earlier investigation raised significant concern for what we might encounter in this new case. In Reedley, investigators reportedly discovered an illegal biolab containing materials possibly associated with a range of infectious diseases, including hepatitis, COVID, HIV, malaria, and other potentially dangerous pathogens.
And just last year, California lawmakers, including Congressman Jim Costa and David Valadao, introduced a bill designed to strengthen federal oversight of high contaminant labs, now urging Congress to take action following this latest discovery.
Now that we see that, we have this problem is widespread and we don't know how many other such labs might exist across the country, I think that we urgently need to pass that bill.
Now, in a statement, Congressman Costa said he's not surprised by this discovery, saying he's been ringing the bell on this issue for more than 2 years now. The County of Fresno and the City of Reedley are set to hold a joint press conference tomorrow afternoon to provide an update on that Reedley lab. At the live desk, Vincent Camarillo, ABC 30, Action News.
Okay, thank you for that. And so I have the congressional report. So let me show you this. Many tabs. Here it is. No. Right here. Sorry for the delay. All good things in time. Right there. So I found this. Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Investigation into the Reedley Biolab. So this is the prior raid in 2023. That raid prompted all of this work. In this forward by Congressman Jim Costa, as mentioned, and you scroll through here, and there's just a ton of information on what was going on in there. local officials and obtained an inspection warrant, which they executed March 16, 2023. Inside the Reedley Biolab, officials observed blood, tissue, and other bodily fluid samples and serums and thousands of vials of unlabeled fluids and suspected biological material, raising the concern that they contained pathogens. Some of these vials were labeled with the names of pathogens in English or Mandarin. Many were unlabeled. Others were labeled in code. Officials never found the full key that would translate this code, meaning that the nature of these vials' contents is unknown to this day. They found laboratory equipment, including a biological safety cabinet and centrifuge. And if you go down here and you keep on reading, which I did, and you look at what they're dealing with here, they're dealing with materials that would, in a regulated facility, require a biosecurity lab level 4 security protocol, which of course this place simply didn't. In addition to that, they found a lot of mice, lab mice, living in terrible conditions, filthy cages, which they were apparently injecting with antigens, including, it appears, COVID antigens. Where have we heard that before? We'll come back to it. It isn't clear why. What we do know is that this was some sort of an operation where they were importing counterfeit test kits for a variety of different pathogens, viruses, and other kinds of medical test kits, and then relabeling these substandard Chinese-made knockoffs with labels that made them appear to have been produced in the United States or elsewhere at higher quality levels. But they were doing some sort of testing. And if you read this, it'll tell you that it doesn't even make sense for them to have been conducting whatever kind of testing they were doing there, because it doesn't look like it may not even have been directly related to the production or distribution of these test kits. But but there is evidence that they were injecting these mice with antigens in order to get them to produce antibodies for some sort of research. And to this day, what was really going on in that Reedley lab remains something of a mystery now. But wait, there's more. This Zhu, the property owner, after being targeted, he fled to Canada to escape like fraud charges related to the, I guess the, what do you say, the illegal distribution and relabeling of these test kits and possibly other things. So he's facing these charges, and where does he go? He heads off to Canada. He flees to Canada and set up a bunch of fake companies, essentially, under a scheme, according to the information in here, to steal American intellectual property related to selective breeding and cattle. So this is all agribusiness stuff. Now, exactly what the activities were, it's really kind of unclear, but he was involved in some sort of a scheme to steal intellectual property related to research into cattle and selective breeding methods, which of course we know is designed or is executed to produce cattle that will be more productive, produce more meat or produce more milk, through genetic engineering, essentially through selective breeding. And here you see there are references to Canada and some articles related to this Canadian businessman facing jail over fraud has appeal stayed following no show because he was at one point, I guess, facing charges in Canada. The following evidence establishes that Zhu was using David He as an alias. First, federal law enforcement confirmed this information in their federal complaint. Second, employees working at the Reedley Biolab told officials that David He is, in fact, Jesse Zhu. Third, Select Committee investigators discovered numerous documents belonging to IND Group and Jesse Zhu in the Reedley Biolab. These include thousands of pages of IND Group, AIDE, and other Zhu companies, corporate documents, tax records, and it goes on. There's his picture. There's his ID, printout of his driver's license. Zhu continues to operate a web of interconnected PRC and US-based companies used in his fraudulent activities. In perpetrating IP theft in Canada, Zhu used a network of interconnected companies in the PRC, Canada, and elsewhere that were notionally distinct, but in practice all subject to Zhu's direction and control. The Supreme Court of British Columbia found in 2016 that Zhu uses his companies and nominee shareholders and directors with little or no regard for the notional separate personality of his companies. Rather, he creates corporations and appoints nominees to create the false appearance that a company is not owned or controlled by him, or otherwise to carry out his intentions, which in this case were unlawful. This is also done to shield himself from liability for such unlawful actions. While operating in the U.S., even the limited evidence available to the Select Committee demonstrates that Zhu continued to engage in a similar pattern of behavior with UMI and the other entities Zhu controlled. For example, documents found at the Reedley Biolab indicate that UMI borrowed $240,000 from two of Zhu's previously established companies, IND Dairy Tech USA, Inc., and International New Tech Developments. You see, it's all about the dairy industry. It's all about meat. It's all about cattle. It's all about agribusiness. It's about COVID, antigen injections, COVID antibody research, and the importation of substandard test kits and the distribution of them, relabeling them fraudulently. And the full depth of this, even with this investigation, still not entirely known, even as Mr. Z or Zhu or whatever name he happens to be using today sits in jail. And now we're seeing that there is at least one other lab, maybe even more, related to this out there because they just raided one in Las Vegas. Now, Mr. Kiley, whom we saw in that report from ABC 30. Let me find him here for you. Right here. He's calling for more affirmative action on this. Let's pick him up. Right here.
A serious national security issue that requires the immediate attention and immediate action from the United States Congress. An illegal biolab was just raided in Las Vegas, and it is directly linked to the secret Chinese biolab found in Reedley, California in late 2022. That lab was oozing with E. coli, HIV, malaria, and other dangerous pathogens. The lab just raided in Vegas was operated by the same LLC and same Chinese nationals as the one discovered in Reedley. Now, we know a lot about the one discovered in Reedley because I requested a report from the House of Representatives, an investigation which resulted in a report by the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. And I want to share some of the details of that report, but I'll start with its conclusion that no one knows whether there are other unknown biolabs because there is no monitoring system in place. Those were the words of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party in 2023. Well, now we know there was at least one other such lab, but we still don't know how many others because the legislation, the bipartisan legislation that I have proposed with Representative Costa and Valadao has not yet been passed. So here's what we learned about this lab that was discovered in Reedley and that has now had a counterpart discovered in Las Vegas. It was run by an international fugitive from China named Jesse Zhu. After running various state-connected companies in China, Zhu moved to Canada, where he set up dozens of corporations to, quote, steal valuable American intellectual property and unlawfully transfer it to China. The Supreme Court of British Columbia found he committed, quote, fraud on an epic scale, resulting in a $330 million judgment. He then fled to America, assumed an alias, David He, and set up several more companies, including the one behind the Reedley Biolab and now the Vegas Biolab. He was indicted in 2023 and has been in federal custody ever since, but his partner and other associates have not been. Now, the Reedley lab was discovered in December of 2022 when a code inspector came upon a suspicious warehouse. Inside, she found many Chinese nationals wearing white lab coats, glasses, masks, and latex gloves, along with thousands of vials of biological substances and 1,000 mice. It was later learned these were transgenic mice, genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus. A further inspection found blood, tissue, and other bodily fluid samples and serums, along with thousands of vials of, quote, suspected biological material. Some of the vials were labeled with the names of infectious agents, while others were labeled in a code that was never deciphered. Now, at first, the CDC, this was during the Biden administration, refused to investigate, and they even hung up on local officials who asked for help. After Representative Costa got involved, the CDC did an inspection and found at least 20 potentially infectious agents.
I want to stop there. Listen to what he just said. So they received complaints about this, and the CDC at the time didn't even want to look at it. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Let's continue.
Including HIV, tuberculosis, and the deadliest known form of malaria. Yet, the CDC did not bother to test any samples, even those with unknown contents, making it, quote, impossible for the Select Committee to fully assess the potential risks that this specific facility posed to the community. The Select Committee report calls this baffling. Later, local officials discovered a refrigerator in the lab labeled Ebola. Now, while the supposed purpose of the lab was to sell test kits, in fact, all the company did was buy counterfeit kits from China and resell them in the United States. Thus, the committee found there was a lack of apparent legitimate or even profit-motivated criminal motive in the operation of the facility. Meanwhile,
in other words, they had to be doing something else. The kits were a moneymaker, but whatever they were doing with whatever kind of research they were doing, we still don't know why.
Zhu, its operator, was receiving unexplained payments via wire transfer from Chinese banks. As I mentioned, the report concluded that we don't know if there are any other unknown biolabs because there's no such monitoring system. So that is why I am calling upon the House to act quickly to pass the bill that I've introduced along with Representatives Costa and Valadao to find any other such labs that exist across the country and assure that they are shut down. The Preventing Illegal Laboratories and Protecting Public Health Act would address gaps in federal law outlined in this congressional report. Specifically, it would require distributors of highly pathogenic agents to maintain federally reviewable logbooks of all transfers, including purchaser identity and intended use, for at least 3 years. It would strengthen oversight by mandating federal review of the number, location, and risks of high containment labs, with updated national standards for design, construction, and operation. It would protect against foreign threats by ensuring adversaries cannot exploit weak U.S. oversight to establish these secret labs. It would create a public health, biosafety, and biosecurity team as a single point of contact for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments when suspicious labs are identified. And it would require a feasibility study on creating a centralized national database of high containment labs accessible to state and local officials for biosecurity purposes. As the city manager of Reedley, Nicole Ziba, said, who was centrally involved in trying to get the federal and state authorities to take action here, she said that the Reedley incident highlighted a gap in the nation's biosecurity. Any city around this country could have dozens of deadly pathogens stored next to sensitive locations and be completely unaware of it. She said that this proposed legislation puts us on a path to closing that critical gap that will help keep every American safe from the hazards like those that were discovered in the Reedley lab. And now, of course, we've seen alarmingly similar hazards discovered in the Vegas lab. So I will be calling for a thorough investigation of what was discovered in Las Vegas, and I'm calling upon the House of Representatives to move quickly to get this bipartisan bill passed so that it can then pass the Senate and be signed into law.
So he wants a thorough investigation. It's underway, but how far will it go? We don't know. Wow. So CDC didn't even really want to look at it initially. And he's highlighting gaps in not just enforcement, but even the methods that would detect or root out these kinds of illegal biolabs. Clearly, there is a problem that's more widespread, and the system is not set up to detect it or even deal with it. But it is against the law to be conducting any kind of research like this without a proper bioresearch facility, that it has to meet certain levels, like biosecurity level 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 being the highest. And you need authorization, you need licensing, permits in order to conduct any kind of research using these kinds of pathogens, and or even just to use these antigens, which in the case of the Reedley facility, there is evidence they were injecting these mice to produce COVID antibodies. Big red flags for me. A lot of talk about that Winnipeg lab and the Chinese connection to that. Not saying that this is directly related to it. I'm not sure that that is the case, but what it highlights for me is that you have, in this case, some sort of criminal operation run with this property owner involved, and he's sitting in jail right now because he was importing test kits illegally, fraudulently relabeling them, engaged in some sort of research, stealing intellectual property, which is the research being conducted into selective breeding of cattle, big agribusiness, big dairy. You know, it doesn't take much to start to connect dots. Now, I don't want to get into any kind of conspiracies here, but this highlights real concerns in regulatory agencies, enforcement, law enforcement, public health, and the proliferation of what appears to be biolabs, illegally run, private, illegal criminal activity biolabs, not only in the United States, but in Canada as well. Now, again, I am not saying, just let me be very clear here. I'm not saying that what was going on at the ostrich farm out in British Columbia was directly related in any way to what we're seeing here, either in Las Vegas right now or previously in Reedley. But let me frame this for you in a way that I think may give some valuable perspective. A friend of mine, when the pandemic hit, he's a business guy, a bit of an entrepreneur. So masks were the craze, right? Everybody had to get masked up. So he went and made a deal to import a whole crap load of masks when COVID first hit. Now, he wasn't doing anything illegal. Let me be very clear about this. He wasn't relabeling anything. He wasn't fraudulently presenting anything, but he did import a bunch of masks and quickly sold them and flipped them and made a profit. I'm not sure who he sold them to, whether it was businesses or the healthcare industry or whomever, but he sold these masks in short order because everybody at the time was so scared and everybody was scrambling to get their hands on these masks, which, as you know, for a time were in short supply. So that just highlights that at the time, everybody was, if there's a crisis, there's opportunity. And the opportunity here for many people was to make a lot of money, whether it was importing masks or conducting some sort of research. And we saw that even out at that ostrich farm, where they have stated very clearly that they pivoted during the pandemic from using the farm to produce food, using ostriches as food, to research exclusively. But they were conducting research even prior to that. And we've seen that they have stated on CBC television, they stated publicly prior that they were injecting those ostriches with COVID antigens. And yet everybody has been just so caught up in the narrative out there of the propaganda that this was all about save the ostriches. Save the ostriches, save the ostriches. We can't have the ostriches die. And talking about masks, all of the media circus out there, complete with bouncy castles, and even those ostriches were used as a psychological tool to disarm all of us by making us feel for them. And the focus was on bird flu. No research into bird flu ever took place out there. The research was into COVID, as stated by the farm owners. But it was all muddled and the messaging was all mixed up because they flooded everybody with information. Just a tsunami of emotion, misdirection, refocusing everybody on bird flu, because it was the bird flu that brought the CFIA out there, an anonymous tip to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that brought the CFIA out to the farm, not the COVID research. How did the COVID research play into all of this? We don't know what it was doing to the immune systems of those birds. We do know this: they didn't have permits. We also know that they had stated very clearly in interviews that they said they were working with Dr. Tsukamoto, a researcher from Japan, who was developing masks for COVID using ostrich antibodies. And that what they were doing was somehow related to him. They kept throwing his name around as they were out there seeking investors and trying to sell this technology or this idea even to a mask production company in British Columbia. I spoke to the former chief financial officer of that company. It's a fact. I spoke to the guy. I shared that with you here. So they were clearly involved in this. And yet through all of this, there was all this misdirection, the conflicting stories from the farm. All of this still concerns me today. And I don't even like talking about this stuff. But here we go again. Now it's on the U.S. side, but there's this Canadian connection. And it seems like there is a problem, as highlighted by Mr. Kiley in his address to Congress, with illegal biolabs operating, doing research with various kinds of pathogens and antigens and without permits or any kind of oversight, and sometimes even just in garages or on farms. And I kept saying what they were running out there at the ostrich farm really amounted to an open air biolab. And they weren't getting the terminology. They weren't consistent in the way that they were describing the terminology. Let me just, I'm going to bring this up if I can find it. From the ostrich farm itself. Because they, right here, they've acknowledged in a statement on May 21st of last year, they were trying to clarify after making statements that were so conflicting, flipping and flopping, for, at times saying they didn't inject them with anything, and then other times messaging from the farm was, "Oh yes, we were injecting them," and they made a statement on CBC television saying they were injecting them with the spike proteins, and the different terminologies made it unclear what they were injecting them with. But they state right here on May 21st, 2025, that those ostriches were being injected with COVID antigens, using antigens to stimulate antibody production in laying hens' egg yolks while doing research. Now, to say this is a standard process that is being used in natural avian antibody production? No, it's not. Farmers do not go around and, as standard practice, inject their birds with COVID antigens. That's not a standard practice. But that's what they were doing at the ostrich farm. Now, you think it's just about the ostriches and save the ostriches? No, it's not. It was never just about the ostriches. And the focus was on the bird flu, which was, from a legal perspective, the main concern for the CFIA. But all this other research, they just let it slide. Like, it was very strange to me. Again, like CDC didn't want to investigate the Reedley incident, the Reedley lab. Finally, over time, it did result in investigations, and now it's, and even, back in 2023, it was generating real concerns. Because to conduct research like that, even to be injecting mice with COVID antigens, is illegal. Now, this guy's sitting in jail, this Chinese national. What's happened out at the ostrich farm? Well, the birds were culled, but all the stuff regarding COVID research has just been pushed off to the side. Like, it wasn't even really something to be concerned about, because the vast majority of people think that these birds were just producing bird flu antibodies and needed to be saved for that kind of research, when in fact it was all about the COVID research out there, which just didn't get the play after a while, because that was just too controversial and too concerning to people. So they had to suppress that information, which is what they did. And you look at this statement, even from May. It's no big deal. It's just standard practice to go around and, inoculating, or that isn't the right word, to inject your birds with COVID antigens and then let them run around out in the open. And so it is true, I guess, that they were not using mRNA or live viruses. Nevertheless, to be using COVID antigens, you still are supposed to have permits. You need a proper facility in which to conduct that kind of work. And they confirm right here that they were doing this work right in this statement. So there's no question they were working with COVID-19 research, but all the social media posts focused on other things. And at times, people like Jim Kearse came online and said, oh, we weren't injecting those birds with anything. Those birds weren't injected. Don't even worry about that, folks. Just donate now. So there's Canada. Winnipeg lab, ostrich thing. It's weird. And I'm not saying that, if they weren't charged with anything, then hey, whatever. But all the COVID stuff pushed off to the side, all the charges, everything, all the legal stuff circulating around the farm related to bird flu, which was serious enough. But in the court of public opinion, the government loses, the farm wins. I think, the foreign interference wins too, frankly. Because the messaging focused on the emotions. Back to what's going on in the States with these two biolabs and this property owner who was involved in this Chinese national who was involved in the illegal COVID research and the injection of mice with COVID antigens. Same damn thing there that they were doing with those ostriches, injecting them with COVID antigens. Why is it such a concern down in the U.S. where this guy's sitting in jail, and yet out at the farm in BC, it's like no big deal, or we're not going to look at that? You know what it is, partly? Nobody complained. I don't think there was a formal complaint ever filed about the COVID research. It was all about the bird flu. And while everybody thinks that the government, I guess, goes around hunting down these farms and that they just come on willy-nilly in order to make life miserable for farm owners, what happened out at that farm in BC was complaint driven. It was a local person who reported the farm because they had 69 dead birds. And they hadn't disposed of them properly, and it was a big problem. It brought the government out there, finally. But what about the COVID stuff? I don't think anybody filed a formal complaint about that, and then the government had its hands full with the bird flu law enforcement, the CFIA never focused on that. But there are laws in Canada, too, about the way you can conduct research, regardless of what spin was put on the information. And, we were told here that, oh, no, it's no big deal. Anybody can get that antigen. A certain doctor said that. And then I went, well, if that's really the case, then the next day I went out and I tried for many days to acquire COVID antigens like they were using out of the farm myself. And I wasn't able to obtain any legally. No matter where I phoned, no one would sell it to me because you need permits and proper credentials, and for good reason. It's medical research into a pathogen that's novel, new. It hasn't been around long. It's of such concern that the FBI returned today to the facility in Reedley. Now, I have this. Before I show you what the FBI said today, I'm going to take you back and show you how that facility in Reedley, California, was discovered and how it was first reported. Here it is here. And here we go.
In December, I received an anonymous complaint. At the front of the building, we have an alcove that's typically empty. There have been a lot of vehicles in the alcove, and we received a complaint that possibly someone was utilizing the warehouse. We don't have a valid business license on file for it. So I came out to do a follow-up inspection. So when I circled around, I found this garden hose. On the back side of the building, this garden hose runs the entire length of the building and is fed in through the side of the wall. And this is a building violation. So because they drilled through and fed it through for the use of water, I needed to gain access into the building and confirm what they were.
Yeah.
Business. I observed this, I took photos of this garden hose, and then I observed that the loading door for when this was an active business was propped open, and there was a ventilation tube coming out. So obviously this warehouse was in usage. Just seeing these two gave me the authority to go and knock on the door and to make contact with anyone that was on site to request an inspection. Okay, so these items here are embargoed, and when we embargo, these are finished components for the medical devices, and these are the items that the state has jurisdiction to enforce on. So as we're going through our abatement, what we're having to do is open boxes and determine what is finished product and what is a finished component. So the components can be thrown away.
The monster is.
Yeah, be careful of the monsters too. Yeah. Yeah, we need to wait for just a second here.
They're just little plastic pieces, but these items have to be destroyed in front of a CDPH officer as proof that they cannot go out into circulation into the public anymore. So at this point of time, because of the abatement and us needing to open the room to be able to get everything situated for the upcoming abatements, we've moved all of the refrigerators out since they've been sanitized. And we're storing them outside because what we'll need to do is, per the EPA requirements, we will have to drain the coolant out of the refrigerators before they can be disposed of.
Okay. So it took a bylaw officer to kind of get things going out there so that they had some sort of an investigation into this. And the only way they really were able to get in to figure out what it was because they saw a garden hose sticking out the side of the building, which is a building code violation. Now, you go up to the ostrich farm, for instance, in Canada, in BC, and they're way up there in an unincorporated regional district, right? Which is not like a full-fledged municipality. And so a lot less rules, fewer bylaws. People don't come by and inspect things there too much. So they're kind of left, all the farmers to their own devices. So there's not much scrutiny. You get away with a lot of things in a place like that. So it just absolutely highlights real concerns. And there are similarities here. This highlighting a real big problem, especially on the U.S. side. So much so that, as I said, the FBI returned to the site of the original raid in Reedley and just have completed this news conference, which I'm going to bring to you now. This fresh, very fresh FBI Fresno area press conference about the Reedley facility tied to the Las Vegas Biolab. And here's what the officials there have to say about it tonight.
Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Gary Bradefeld, Chairman of the Board of Supervisors. I'm joined by my colleagues, Supervisors Brian Pacheco, Luis Chavez, Buddy Mendez, and Nathan Magzig. Also here is Sheriff John Zanoni, Reedley Mayor Matthew Tuttle, Reedley City Manager Nicole Ziba, County Administrative Officer Paul Nerlin, Public Health Director Joe Prado, and Larry Salinas, Deputy Chief of Staff for Congressman Jim Costa. We're here today in the wake of another lab that was recently discovered in Las Vegas with ties to the lab found 3 years ago in Fresno County, specifically in the city of Reedley. As you know, I've been focused on transparency and accountability to the public. These are more than just principles. It's our responsibility as elected officials. When security is compromised, people deserve clear, honest communication about what happened, what is being done, and how our government will prevent similar events in the future. By being open and accountable, we strengthen public confidence and ensure that our response is guided by collaboration, good judgment, and specifically what's in the best interests of our residents and community. That's why we're all here today. All of the speakers that follow me will be sharing very important information. And with that, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Mendez, in whose district the lab was discovered 3 years ago. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. In late 2022, the City of Reedley Code Enforcement, Jocelyn Harper, discovered an unlicensed biological and chemical lab operating in Reedley. That contained hazardous pathogens, including samples of COVID-19. There was 1,000 transgenic mice that were there. There was Chinese-made.
Let me just clarify for that. What transgenic mice? That means that they were humanized, genetically altered, in order to produce a result with the antibody research that would give them information on how the research would affect humans. They're basically humanized. They've altered the DNA to humanize the mice in order to produce a result in the research that can benefit human beings.
Pregnancy and COVID tests fraudulently labeled made in the USA, and unsafe storage of infectious and other hazardous material. The city manager, Nicole Ziva, contacted the county and eventually Congressman Costa. And that was the genesis of a 3-year investigation revealing the operation had ties to the Chinese ownership and funding, raised alarm about foreign adversaries exploiting weaknesses in the U.S. biosafety oversight. And that's why Congressman Costa was involved. This past weekend, another lab was discovered in Las Vegas with ties to the lab in Reedley. Both the Las Vegas Police Department and the FBI responded quickly to remove the chemicals and remediate the property. To elaborate on this, I'm going to have this great city manager, Nicole Ziva, speak on this.
Thank you, Supervisor Mendez. No pressure with that introduction. Thank you for being here today. As you know, Supervisor Bredefeld and I talked when Reedley Lab was first introduced, and one of the comments was about the transparency of what was happening in the Reedley situation. And by lab, by the way, I want to define that storage of laboratory materials, chemicals, biologicals. And so in this latest weekend, when we had what happened in Vegas happen, and it didn't stay in Vegas, by the way, right? And so our community in Reedley, particularly, but truly all around Fresno County, has been calling, has been emailing, lots of comments on social media. And what we discovered is there are a lot of people in our community who missed it the first time around and are now wondering, for goodness sakes, what happened? What did I miss? And am I still at risk? We're hearing that. We're also hearing from our community saying, wow, I forgot about that situation. Where is all of that in process now? And so in agreement with Supervisor Bredefeld and the other supervisors, transparency to our public being critical, we wanted to get the public up to speed on where we are. Because there is a current case pending against the operator or the owner of the materials that were in the Reedley facility, we do want to be careful. We don't want to jeopardize anybody's case in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we were not privy to the search warrants and the information that was discovered in Vegas. So we will not be able to speak specifically to Vegas. I will tell you that the city of Reedley and the folks that are standing behind me here who were here in 2022, December 2022, when it was first discovered, were not necessarily surprised, however, that there was a Vegas connection. Simple record searches, simple Google searches could find that Vegas was somehow connected to the owner and operator of what happened in Reedley. So we were not surprised. We're sympathetic, we are empathetic for the citizens of Vegas because we know how traumatic it was for our community to have these deadly viruses and diseases, to have 1,000 transgenic, that means genetically modified mice, to have human components or human capabilities when you are testing them. That's what transgenic means, by the way. To have 1,000 of those next to them, they were scared, right? So I do feel for the folks in Vegas and particularly within that neighborhood because I have to imagine they are feeling what our Reedley citizens were feeling at the time this was discovered. So we have a few components moving forward that have been moving forward since this was discovered in 23 or because of actions thereon. A lot of our public may not remember, but we did go through a very lengthy process with the courts to get inspection warrants, to get abatement warrants. We returned those warrants. We did everything that the law required us to do. What remained in that warehouse after that abatement, two things really. We had the pregnancy and COVID tests, or rather the medical devices as they're called. We still have pallets of those in 850 I Street. Those have been embargoed by the state. They're under state control. They remain in 850 I Street under state control. The other thing that we had was boxes and boxes of paperwork. And the city was not authorized to destroy those or touch those, so we left those. Those were the two remaining things. So I want to assure the public that FBI was in Reedley on Sunday. And a lot of our public believes that potentially they were looking for biologicals. I want to assure the public there were no biologicals, no chemicals, no laboratory equipment in that facility after our initial abatement. Nothing returned. So we are safe. We are not privy to what was in the search warrant that the FBI had. It was a sealed search warrant, and so I cannot tell you exactly what they were looking for. What I can tell you right now is that what remains in 850 I Street after Sunday is the state embargoed medical test kits, the pregnancy tests, and the COVID tests. And again, those are under state control. The city has no authority over those tests. We also are getting a lot of calls and comments from our public of why was Vegas able to do this in 24 hours, but the city of Reedley, you took so long, you took so many months. I want to remind all of us in Fresno County that there was no situation to turn back to and say, how did this particular city deal with it? Let's follow their lead. We were it. We were the test case. Essentially, there was no manual to pull off the shelf. We have written the manual, so to speak. How Vegas did it so quickly, I couldn't tell you because we were not assisted by the FBI. We were not assisted by multiple agencies who pulled in scientists from around, who had us go to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We really had to go it alone, the county and the city, and we had to facilitate conversations with multiple state and federal agencies to figure out what we needed to do to get this done. That is why it took so long. Ultimately, we were able to beg the CDC and other agencies to come on site. That took until May. This was discovered in December of 2022. It took until May to get those agencies on site. The CDC was there for 2 days. They simply cataloged the names on the vials that they could understand. There were vials in English, vials in Mandarin, vials that were coded, and we never did find the key code, and vials that were not labeled. They took nothing with them. They sampled nothing. So I'm often asked what was in all of those vials. I can tell you the vials that were labeled in English. Most of those you already have a list of: malaria, dengue fever, H. pylori, chlamydia, those sorts of things. No select agents were there, or were found, I should say. There were no labels with anything of a select agent. And select agents are those agents that you are not able to possess as a private laboratory. When we say select agent, by the way, that's the worst of the worst: Ebola, anthrax, etc. So I do want to assure our public we followed the process established by the courts in terms of getting our warrants, doing everything by warrant. Now, what the public also may not recall is the city was served with a lawsuit by the owner and operator of, well, the owner of those materials. And so we are still involved in a lawsuit, $30 million against the city of Reedley for destroying the deadly diseases and the lab mice. The county has a similar lawsuit, and they can speak to that. There is no date yet for that court hearing on that lawsuit. So as you can tell, this is a very complex case that didn't yet go away. It wasn't yet solved. It wasn't yet closed. There are lots of components still involved in this case. But we want to assure the public here in Reedley, they are safe. The public is safe. We're moving forward on all the administrative necessities to close everything down and move on. So that being said, I do want to just state that Reedley and the county went alone on this. We were not assisted by the state. We were not assisted by the federal government until we were able to call Congressman Costa and get somebody's attention. And so in this room, I just want to provide, again, my thanks to Congressman Costa and his staff for taking us seriously, for getting us in touch with federal authorities, and for really making those federal authorities assist us in this process. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the county, and I believe that would be Joe Prado. No. Excuse me, Supervisor Magazine.
I play Joe.
So again, she's highlighting for you right there that in order to get the federal government in the U.S. and the CDC to come out and actually do something, they basically had to beat them with a stick. And they had to call in, congressmen to get some action. And it took a long time. Well, you have these very serious pathogens in a seedy little industrial building with a garden hose sticking out the back, and obviously not a secure biolab facility at all.
Prado on TV.
It's weird.
So thank you all for being here. So again, unlike Las Vegas, it had strong FBI support and what appears to be a joint terrorism task force response. Here in Fresno County, we had to go it alone. And I really appreciate Reedley.
Weird.
And while we had 14 different agencies that were partnering with the county, where we had literally weekly meetings with them on what to do with the Reedley laboratory, we basically were told to kind of figure it out. And so we used the legal processes going to court to eventually being able to destroy the biologicals that were in the laboratory themselves. A lot of those we did not test at all. We just wanted to get rid of all those materials, and a lot of the mice that were there ended up dying in the process, but they needed to be put down in a humane way as well. So what was alluded to, the fact that Reedley has a...
I'm surprised that, some people didn't show up down there, that, the usual characters to start a Save the Mice campaign and get you to donate to that. I mean, he's saying they had to be put down in a humane way. Does anybody care about the mouse cull from the Reedley Biolab incident? No, nobody cares, I guess.
A lawsuit against them for $30 million. The county also has a lawsuit against us for that $30 million too. And so we spent months making sure that we followed legal processes, keeping the public safe. The FBI was involved in part of these conversations, and so was the California Department of Public Health. Where I was disappointed a little bit as a supervisor 2.5 years ago is I was more hopeful that at the federal and state level they would have been more engaged in this process. And as was already stated, really Reedley and the county had to write the process. What do we do when we discover an illegal private laboratory that is not regulated? Out of all of this, the county also took some additional steps. We created a county ordinance, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors in January of 2024. This allows our Department of Public Health to conduct annual inspections of non-CLIA, which stands for Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, or privately funded research labs. And it was the county's stopgap response that we had to put this in place, because right now private laboratories are not regulated at the state or federal level. And again, Congressman Costa's name's been mentioned several times. He has been working for a couple of years now to try to get federal legislation in place to regulate private laboratories. Right now, he has a bill which is also supported by Republicans and Democrats. It's H.R. 5747. And it is the Preventing Illegal Laboratories and Protecting Public Health Act. And we would call on Congress right now as a body just to engage, because now that the second laboratory that was discovered in Las Vegas recently, it shows that there is a real need to make sure that we have regulations and protections in place when it comes to for our communities.
In other words, see, a lot of what they were doing there was a lack of an enforcement mechanism, even on the U.S. side. And there's not very much scrutiny taking place. And you can set up a lab, but then you don't really know what's going on in there. And in the absence of effective state or federal regulations that give authorities proactive mechanisms that they can use to go in and inspect these places and make sure they're operating safely, the municipality had to act unilaterally to come up with some new bylaws so that they can inspect these facilities and get in there and then deal with anything illegal that is happening. And it was a bylaw enforcement officer basically that went by and used the hose coming through the wall as the reason or the justification for going into the building and then discovering all of the illegal activities inside. And yet in Canada, at the ostrich farm, it's like, oh, well, they were doing all of this stuff, which does require regulations, but it was like, oh, well, we're only worried about the bird flu, like it just completely ignoring it. It's just, it blew my mind then. It blows my mind now. And it's clearly a much more widespread thing. I'll comment a little bit further on it. But right now.
So at this time, I would like to call forward our sheriff,
Bizarre.
Sheriff John Zanoni.
It's so serious. It's public health.
Thank you, Supervisor Meitzig. Sheriff John Zanoni, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. When we talk about what happened in Reedley and now what happened in Las Vegas, we see a breakdown of communication. We see people taking advantage of loopholes in the law and operating these illegal labs with these pathogens, as we've discussed, from malaria to HIV to many other things that are very serious in nature and they're not controlled. And this is putting our national security at risk because no one knows about these labs. Here it is in Vegas in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Just yesterday, I received a phone call from Sheriff Kevin McMahill from Las Vegas Metro Police Department, and he expressed his concerns to me, and they had several locations there, one of which turned out to be the lab with the pathogens, and really this really bad biological lab that's in the middle of this neighborhood. And I think we all saw them in the media, how they went about with the SWAT team and the hazmat suits and all the precautions they took. And here this is right next door to where people are living. This is not acceptable. The individuals running these labs, from what I've been told from FBI officials and from folks in Las Vegas, are Chinese nationals and other individuals who are out here in our communities. It's unregulated. We really don't know what's going on. And lo and behold, when we go to these locations, we're finding things that are significant health risk and potentially even could cause death to individuals here in the United States. So when we talk about current federal law regulates only a limited list of select agents, leaving many dangerous pathogens outside of federal tracking requirements. The Preventing Illegal Laboratories and Protecting Public Health Act closes these gaps by requiring distributors to maintain federally reviewable records of all transfers, creating a federal framework to evaluate high contaminant labs nationwide, and strengthening coordination between federal, state, and local governments to protect public health and national security. And with that, I think the concern and the conversation I had with Sheriff McMahill was, Where are there other labs? I mean, these are two that we know of, but there's probably other labs out there. Where are they operating? How are they operating? And who is operating them? And that is a scary thought in our discussion when we think about the pathogens, the viruses, and these select agents that are in these labs. And there's no record of it. None of our law enforcement, none of our public health people don't know where they are. And that really is a threat to the security of the United States because
of the world.
They're not regulated. Who knows who's dealing with this stuff? What are they doing with it? What are their intentions of operating these labs under the radar within our country? So with that, I can tell you that we've had conversations at the sheriff's office with FBI officials, with officials in Las Vegas, and we've discussed this. We are communicating, and as was said earlier by Nicole, the city manager of Reedley, there is no threat. Everything that was in the lab in Reedley was taken out back in 2023. But the question remains is, are there other labs out there, and where are they? Mm-hmm. So with that, I want to have Chairman Bredefield come back up to the podium.
Thank you, Sheriff. We have a video message from Congressman Costa, if we can tee that up.
That Reedley City Manager was terrific. Nicole Ziva, she always was such a... Good afternoon, I'm Congressman Jim Costa, and I wish I could be with you today, but Congress is in session. I want to recognize the City of Reedley as we gather to reaffirm our commitment to community safety following the illegal laboratory that was discovered in 2023. I also want to take note that Reedley City Manager was terrific. Nicole Ziva, she always does such a good job, along with Code Enforcement Officer Jesselyn Harper, the city's leadership, local law enforcement, and first responders for their swift and professional response when this issue first surfaced. Their work protected the residents and helped prevent what could have become a much more serious public health threat. But because of their efforts, Reedley was able to address the immediate danger and move safely forward with the support, of course, with the mayor and the city council, who we worked closely with. The city contacted my office for help, and my team immediately jumped into action, successfully pressuring the federal government to get engaged within days. They hadn't been listening, and neither had the state. At the federal level, I worked to complement those local efforts by introducing legislation, H.R. 5747, the Prevent Illegal Laboratories and Protecting Public Health Act. This bipartisan legislation strengthens federal oversight and gives authorities the tools needed to identify and shut down illegal laboratory operations before they put communities at risk. You know, when this was all discovered, I brought this to the Congress, and we had a study that was done and a report that was published, which also resulted in the introduction of another piece of legislation, 3099, the Stop Health Threats Act, which helps equip local first responders and code enforcement authorities with the training and the tools necessary to better identify similar public health threats in their own communities. What we found is that there's gaps, serious gaps across the country. We also work to bring national attention to this issue through congressional oversight efforts, so situations like this in the future are not overlooked. Now, with the second lab that was discovered in Las Vegas, it's clear why my colleagues in Congress need to act urgently and decisively to protect communities from ongoing public safety threats from illegal labs. We could be looking at multi-state issues, and there may be other locations across the country. The FBI is continuing to investigate, and we are working closely with them. This must be treated as a national security and public health priority. And that's what the folks in Reedley and Fresno County have done, and I want to commend them. I am also calling on my colleagues on the House leadership to move this legislation forward, this bipartisan legislation, so we can protect communities, support local authorities, and mitigate future risks. Reedley's experience showed us what can happen when oversight fails. Thank God for the vigilance of the leaders of the city of Reedley and Fresno County. Now we must act to make sure no other community faces the same threat across the country. So let me say thank you to the city of Reedley its leadership, first responders, and residents for your commitment and vigilance and dedication to keeping our community safe. I will continue to do the same on my part, and together we will work to provide greater safety and public security for the people of our country. Thank you.
Excellent comments from Congressman Costa. We are open to questions. Anybody you have a question for? Just fire away.
Supervisor Madsen, I have a question about the county legislation. I also reached out to Costa's office yesterday about this, but because he was in session, he didn't have a chance to get back to me. With this legislation that is proposed right now and even that the county passed, how does that help to address situations like in Wrigley and Vegas where you don't even know where the labs are sometimes?
Yeah, so really what the ordinance that we did here in the county back in 2024 gives us authority over those private labs. But to your point, these are laboratories that have to register with us. So we don't know what we don't know. And so it is a problem. I think the difference between HR 5747 is a lot of the materials that these labs are ordering, it would create a registry. And with that registry, Congress would have oversight. And so a lot of these materials, these viruses that are being sent to the labs directly, there's another filter that would be created. So I think that's very necessary, and that would provide additional oversight. And so we could identify where some of these pathogens are being sent to. And then if there is a private lab that is set up that didn't know there's a county ordinance where there's regulations, we can remind them and then come out and inspect them. Two, with the county ordinance, we have 15 cities in Fresno County. 5 of the cities have signed on so far. They've adopted the ordinance that we passed. We're hopeful that the other 10 will sign up as well. But again, in doing this, it creates almost a patchwork where we need federal regulation, because there's 3,069 counties across the entire United States. So it's best if the federal government creates regulations that all counties can operate under, as well as the cities here in the United States can operate under too.
You mentioned that the county didn't get a lot of help when all of this was happening. Can you share a little bit of what you wish the state would have done and why you think?
Hard to hear the questions.
Well, I can only opine, but I'll tell you, as you recall, about 2.5 years ago, and rightfully so, Gary Bredefeld, as a council member, was frustrated that the county wasn't more transparent. During that time, CDPH was communicating with us, telling us that there were ongoing investigations and that we needed to kind of keep our mouths shut and just work with, in this case, the courts to try to get everything cleaned up. So I think in defense of the state really didn't know how pervasive this issue was here in Reedley. Even though we had come across documentation that we believed that there were other communities that might be experiencing something similar, it took what happened a week ago in Las Vegas, I think, to open the eyes of both the FBI as well as hopefully the California Department of Public Health too, that this really is a significant issue they should pay attention to. I can't think of any other example where something like what happened in Reedley had happened anywhere else. It was like we were reading a fiction novel is what I would compare it to, where you have lab mice, where you have pathogens that are labeled certain things. And while you came across labels that said Ebola, there was no testing of some of those substances. So who knows truly what was in some of these vials and devices being stored in refrigerators, and not refrigerators that were made to store viruses, but just common refrigerators that you would buy at Lowe's or Home Depot. And so very scary stuff. No one had ever seen anything like this before. So I think that in defense of the state and federal government, they didn't really know how to respond. And so they kicked it back to us. We used the courts to take the steps that we took to make sure that that laboratory, the items there, were disposed of properly.
That leads me to a question for Sheriff Zanoni. You mentioned that you had a conversation with Sheriff McMahill. How do you think this sets a precedent for maybe local governments to work together to?
See, I think that's part of the whole issue here, and in Canada too, is some of this stuff is just so unique. It's not, and since the pandemic, I think we've had a proliferation of this kind of thing to a greater degree. And so, but it's something new that the authorities really are grappling with. And when they're stumbling upon this stuff, it's like, I don't know if they even recognize in some cases the actual real threat. And maybe that was what happened in BC.
Well, I think it definitely sets a precedent. to work together because he reached out to me and had some questions about the connection to Reedley and what they were dealing with there in Las Vegas. But you just said something a minute ago, and Supervisor Magsig talked about these materials and a registry of them, because we don't know where these labs are. Nobody knew where these labs were. This lab was in a residential neighborhood in Las Vegas, right next to where people live and raise their kids and their families. And here's a lab with a lot of dangerous pathogens and these agents. So I think, yes, we're going to communicate, but I'm hoping now, without giving up too much of the investigation, that they have these individuals in custody, that the FBI works together with local law enforcement throughout the United States, where these people have connections, where they have ties to, where they're renting, where they're buying houses, where they're doing business, because, there's a good chance that we found two. There's probably more, because it's a lucrative business and it's something that is completely flown under the radar, and nobody can answer what the intentions are. As you heard a minute ago, there's a vial labeled Ebola here in Reedley in a refrigerator that would be in your house, not a secured refrigerator. These, aren't in some lab with a secured perimeter, alarms, and some big fence like you might see, somewhere in the United States or even in a movie type deal. But this is a serious issue, and we have to get on top of it as local, state, and federal law enforcement, because it is a serious security issue for the United States.
And Canada and the world.
That's always a concern when we're talking about stuff like this, because Fresno County is 6,000 square miles, and we've located, marijuana grows across this county. We've located indoor marijuana grows up on properties up here in the foothills in large steel buildings and things like that, where we've gone on scene. We didn't know what was there, but we noticed some hoses, or maybe a deputy responded to a call and said, well, there's a hose and there's some things that look a little out of place, all running to this locked up building. Yeah, the potential is enormous for something like this. And I don't want to scare people, but this was in the middle of a residential neighborhood where people walk down the streets, people live next door, 10, 15, 20 feet away. But there's a lot of places in this country, including the county of Fresno, where a lab could be like this, hidden under the radar, and none of us would know about it. So, yes.
Okay. So, what's the point? It's serious. That's the point. And yet, what we saw in Reedley is officials didn't seem to have a response mechanism that was adequate to deal with what happened there. A more robust response in Las Vegas over the weekend. A lot, taking action and in a very serious way and in a more appropriate way. And then what about BC? Again, and let me make it very clear. I am not saying that the same people are connected at all, but there are similarities in the cases. And what happened out in BC with regard to the COVID research is like nobody seemed to care. And yet look at what we just went through as a society, as a country, as the world with the pandemic. And yet this research is taking place out there in an open air facility. And people were just like, I don't know, subjected to an information campaign that had everybody distracted, not focused on, really, I think the more serious, an equally serious, probably more serious issue was what was being done with regard to the research without any oversight, no scrutiny. And why were people so willingly blinded by all of this? Because you were subjected to trigger words like government overreach. Well, I don't know about you, but after having gone through what we just went through, I want some damn overreach into a facility like we see in Reedley or Las Vegas or any facility that's conducting any kind of research into viruses that are novel, new, messing with the immune systems of mice, birds, rats, rabbits. I don't care what animals you're talking about. I don't care if it's plankton. You need rules to protect people. It can't be a free-for-all, especially when you're conducting research like this. I don't want to get locked down again. I don't know about you. And I'm not just a little bit of, I guess, editorializing, but I think more just an attempt here to offer some perspective. I'm not very conspiratorial. I think that the answer to things is generally, most often, a straight line. And one of the parallels that I see between the ostrich farm and the kind of activity that we've seen in Reedley and in Las Vegas is profit motivated actions, where a private facility was set up, the true objectives of which we're not exactly sure, because we even through the investigation, it hasn't really been revealed or understood what kind of research was being conducted, or why or how the money was being generated, other than through the sale of these test kits. But that doesn't even seem to be necessarily directly related to the storage and use of these pathogens and antigens and the lab mice, the lab animals, upon which research was clearly being conducted. Mice that had been altered genetically, humanized, that is a standard thing to be done in a laboratory environment. Labs do that all the time with mice. They humanize them when they're doing research in order to affect a response that is specific to and valid for research into human products, medical products. It still just blows my mind that the focus never shifted at all to the COVID research out of the ostrich farm. And even now, it's like most people are not aware, or that they've been confused, and it's like that part never happened. And yet that is, in my mind, just as important, if not more important, than the whole focus on the bird flu thing, which in the end became as much, well, really more of a legal battle and a challenge to authority and the rule of law and process than the health concerns and the medical side of it. But in order to preserve the rule of law and the integrity of the system, we got what we got with the way that it unfolded, because it became an anti-government protest and an assault on what was perceived as government overreach, political activism. It became a media circus. The whole thing, an exercise in activism, and there was all this foreign influence. It was quite the spectacle, wasn't it? And through it all, because we had this avalanche of information, people were left very confused in the end. It's that avalanche of information that is as much our enemy as much as censorship is. People say, well, we don't want censorship. And yet we're just as vulnerable, maybe more vulnerable to manipulation through a flood of information. And I'm going to take a quick break. And then when we come back on the other side of this, I'll explain what I mean by that as it relates to what we've just been talking about, and as we move ahead into other top news stories of the day.
Brightleaf Innovations is excited to offer our newest investment opportunity, the Turn Easy Bed Storage Solution.
Turns with a touch, spins all the way around. Every little thing you need is easy to be found. No more clutter, no more mess on the floor. You don't search anymore. Turn easy bed, spin your world around. Storage made simple, the best you found. Shelves your way, keep the mess away. Charge it, store it, night or day. Custom shelves for your books or your tech. Cozy space for your treasures to protect. Built-in power when you need to recharge. Smart design that makes your bedroom feel large. Turn easy bed, spin your world around. Storage made simple, the best you found. Shelves your way, keep the mess away. Charge it, store it, night or day.
Designed and developed by Brightleaf Innovations, proudly Canadian and patent pending in North America. Turn Easy Bed transforms how you live.
To learn more about this innovative new product idea and exciting investment opportunity, call 519-784-0222 or visit brightleafinnovations.com.
So I just looked in the chat for the first time, and I see Stoic Teacher says, let's see, it's a process learning how to let go of the I'm not a conspiracy theorist line. The time is long past fearing that slight. Fair enough. That being said, I still believe, and the point that I'm making is sometimes the truth is just right there in front of you because it is a straight line. You don't have to do all of this. This is why I brought up, what really has been going on in these private biolabs, or what was going on out of the ostrich. It's about making money. It's about trying to survive. It was about trying to survive for that farm during the pandemic. They couldn't get their birds to market because of the COVID lockdowns. The slaughterhouses were not functioning properly. They couldn't get their birds slaughtered. They had problems financially. So they're trying to find some way to make money. And they pivoted to this research where they thought they were going to make, I guess there was an opportunity to make a lot of money with these antibody-laden eggs, which were generated by injecting the birds with COVID antigens. But they didn't do it with, proper oversight, proper regulations. And why were they doing it? And, at the time, there were all kinds of government contracts floating around out there, not just in Canada, not just in the United States, but all over the world, including in Japan. There was government money to be made. That's a huge motivating factor, especially if you're in a business that is niche, like ostrich farming. That ain't chickens. That's ostriches. When was the last time you ate ostrich? Like never? What kind of market is there for that? It's a niche market. It's tough. And they're up in the middle of, the mountains, far away from everything. It's not an easy business to be in, clearly. When the pandemic comes, they're motivated by survival. Got to make money, got to pay the bills. They get involved in this research. Just like down there in Reedley, they're making money. And these are private things. I don't know really how much of a linkage there is to the actual government of China. There may be some. Even that isn't really clear, but you do have illegal activity taking place. It's essentially like a biolab version of an illegal drug lab, in my view, from looking at all the evidence before me. And I don't think that's conspiratorial at all. That's just looking at the facts, looking at the evidence. And this is why we need to be so concerned, because they're just conducting affairs with no regard for public safety. They don't care about the people next door. They don't care enough to put proper security protocols in place. Flying under the radar. Doing illegal things, but doing it in ways that are hidden. in places that are out of sight, out of mind. And while all this was going, like, this is why it just, it still concerns me. That's why I'm still talking about it tonight. Well, at least they're paying attention to it down there in Reedley and now in Vegas. They're dealing with it. What did we do? It was like didn't even register with people that this was a problem. I remember that interview that we ran the clip from CBC television where the farm owner Karen talked about injecting these birds with the COVID antigens, and it just went right over the anchor's head. Like, it didn't even register that might not be legal, or that might be a problem, or maybe that's not proper. It was like, oh, well, isn't that nice? That's not natural. There's nothing holistic or natural about injecting birds with COVID antigens, but they're presenting that to the public like, well, this is a natural remedy, a natural therapy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay, I guess you can smear ostrich yolk on your skin and hope that it makes your hair grow or something, but it's not natural to inject these animals and use them as biolab creatures and let them run around out in the open. It's not standard practice at all. And so I still have concerns about what went on out there. And if you want to get conspiratorial, you don't have to go far. Here's a story that was sent to me overnight, just alerting me Health Canada seals vaccine injury records for 15 years. Now, when I read the story, I think the headline is on the one hand accurate and it is probably ethical and act like it's okay. But on the other hand, there's another way to look at the story too. And this relates to the flood of information. And it's like everything right now is like upside down. I'll explain. It's like any story or narrative is flipped on its head. Victims become the people blamed. All right. It's like you go to a protest and you get shot by the cops and that's your fault. That's what's okay. We're going to come to that too. It's very strange that the mind games that are being played with people, it's like, don't believe your lying eyes. You saw what you saw, but they're telling you not to believe that. And then anytime anything happens, you get this flood of information, whether it's an assassination of Charlie Kirk or, even going back to the JFK assassination or whatever, you pick it. You're never going to know the truth because you instantly get 1,000 different conspiracies and a flood of information and analysis from here and analysis from there, and then of varying opinions that are not based on facts, but because it's just this flood, you can't get to the point. It's like I've made that I as I said a long time ago, the truth is elusive, but a lie is just a lie. Is always just a lie. But the truth is elusive, and it becomes almost impossible to get to the truth when you are flooded with information. And that is just as bad or maybe even more dangerous than censorship. That's why we're grappling with this social media thing. Governments don't know how to deal with foreign interference because as soon as they, if you're in Iran and you're trying to lock down the internet because you might have a foreign government trying to influence people and get them out into the streets to rise up against the government, and you're trying to lock it down, you're accused of censorship. You do the same thing here in Canada when you've got foreign influence flowing into the country en masse, and the government is like, well, maybe we should do something about this. And if you try at all, well, now you're guilty of censorship and you're against free speech. Well, the people screaming about that are lying to you because they're involved in malicious activities or foreign propaganda in order to affect the overthrow of your government. Or you could be viewing it like they're liberating us. Because you've got an oppressive, you see how you spin things? Well, just look at this story. There are two ways to kind of look at this. They're sealing the vaccine injury records for 15 years. Well, they must be hiding something. That would be initially what you're thinking. That may be the case. But if you read down and you look at this and you start to dissect it, that's not in every case. Health Canada has locked away internal reports on vaccine and drug injuries. This is in the Western Standard for up to 15 years, citing the sheer scale of records involved, according to documents in Parliament. See, they've got a problem because of the number of documents. Health Canada confirmed its longest current extension is 15 years, covering a request for vaccine and adverse drug reaction reports dating back to 1998. This is not just about COVID. This is about all vaccine-related adverse injuries. So officials said the request originally involved several million pages of records. It has since been narrowed in scope and is now being processed, but the extended delay remains one of the longest on record within the federal government. And they blamed the backlog on the volume of material moving through senior offices during COVID-19. The need for extensive consultations, parliamentary motions, and what it described as the requester's refusal to narrow the scope of the request. So on the one hand, you can say, well, they're just trying to cover it all up. But are they? You see, because they're being flooded with requests. And in order to deal with each request adequately, it takes time, and that takes staff. And if you're dealing with literally millions of pages, how much staff can you dedicate to processing freedom of information requests related to anything? You have a limited resources, even at the governmental level. So you could argue that they're trying to accommodate, but they can't deal with the volume of requests. And of course, there were a lot during COVID. But then I thought, if you think about it, if you're trying to disrupt things and even discredit the government and just throw a monkey wrench into the whole system, you just flood the zone. You flood it with BS. You put together protests that turn into circuses. You run into protests and get arrested accidentally on purpose. You cause mischief. You become a troublemaker. And then you take a process like a freedom of information request, which as a journalist from time to time you use to extract information for legitimate purposes in order to serve the public interest. But if you want to just be a jerk or a disruptor, you can use those tools, essentially tools of free speech, and turn it against the system in order to undermine free speech. You can just flood the government with requests under Freedom of Information Act, requesting millions and millions and millions and millions of pages. Just throw a monkey wrench into the cogs of the system to just make it impossible for the system to function. So much so that you get a 15-year backlog. So who's really to blame? I can't say tonight. I don't know, because it's not clear to me from the report or the reports that are out there, or even from what has come out of Parliament, maybe it's a little of both, or maybe a lot of both. But now that it's a 15-year backlog, now the government is vulnerable again. Now suddenly Canada looks like an authoritarian, communistic dictatorship. It's commie-land up here, see? They don't give you any information. You have to wait 15 years. In Canada, there's no free speech. Well, why is that? Because they've been flooded with requests to the point where they can't process them all. Is that the government's fault? I don't know. Maybe AI will provide a solution to a lot of that. But it's not just COVID. It's just a lot of these things. You go down here, Public Works reported an extension of 10,000 days on these kinds of requests. Other departments also reported multi-year delays. Industry Canada acknowledged a 12-year extension on one file, while the Immigration and Refugee Board delayed another for a decade. And yet, so this is a government-wide problem, even involving the CRTC, the Canadian Radio Television Communications Commission, the Treasury Board. Delays stretched to 4 years at the Communication Security Establishment, 5 years at Employment, Fisheries, Library, and Archives Canada, and the Privy Council. Public Safety reported a 6-year delay tied to 30,000 pages of classified material. National Defense cited a 7-year extension, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency said it took 8 years to process nearly 68,000 pages of records. I don't know how much staff they have to deal with this stuff. I don't know what kind of budgets they have. Are they being reasonable, unreasonable? I guess we'd need to look at it more closely, but it does seem to me, after looking at all this stuff, that there are two ways to look at it. And then I'm thinking about this Epstein stuff, right? More of that coming out. How much did we get? 3 million pages? It sounds, the more you have, the worse it sounds. But really, how much of that is relevant? How much of that really gets you closer to the truth? Do you need 3 million pages? Not really. You need one witness, one victim, testimony, one piece of proof. It's all buried in there. And we've seen some stuff coming out that seems pretty embarrassing. Does it reach the level of criminality? We'll see if anybody's charged. Somehow I doubt it. And then even as you see the one side celebrating the release of the 3 million, yet at the same time condemning the withholding of another 3 million or more documents. And I'm seeing that if it's documents, that could mean there are many pages attached to the documents. So there could be, 55 million pages of material. How much of that is actually relevant? Why are they releasing so much? Maybe both sides are working to suppress the information. Have you ever thought of that? Well, they just work to smear each other in the court of public opinion. And in reality, they don't really want us to get to the truth because maybe they're all guilty. maybe both sides have guilty parties. Or maybe it's just a game. Maybe. I do know this. When you're looking at that, come on, 3 million pages, that stuff's released. And I was like, every time this happens with these document dumps, new videos and everything, I'm like, well, how the hell am I supposed to process that? I'm one guy. Good luck. So then, of course, I go online. I try to find things. I find other reports. I'm at the mercy of other people doing research and feeding that information to me. And then we're all being subjected to whatever it is that is filtered out. But they have to put a filter up, right? And I guarantee you that people are taking these documents and they're feeding them into computers. And then they're using AI or search mechanisms, search programs, in order to find keywords, in order to zero in on documents with people's names and things, in order to extract the relevant information, to cut through the noise. All this static, trying to find, as Steve Bannon will say, signal. In order to try and get closer to the truth, which they clearly don't want us to get to because they released 3 million documents and they've got another 3 million sitting there, which we may or may not be allowed to see. And then out of all that, you have all these redactions and no charges. And when it comes to actual justice, when it comes to getting a conviction in court, you must prove beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So in order to get somebody off, to get an acquittal, all you have to do is cast shade on something. Just figure out some way to make people question reality. Just inject a little doubt. O.J. Simpson trial. Remember? Simpson's lawyer? Maybe you're not old enough. But I remember If the glove don't fit, you must quit. That's all it took. If the glove don't fit, you must quit. And he was found not guilty on murder charges, 2 of them. Because if the glove don't fit, you must quit. Well, there's a catchy little rhyme. Slogan. Little piece of legal marketing. Different era. Pre-social media. The man that played on TV. If the glove don't fit, you must quit. See, it's still stuck in my mind. 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed, but McDonald's. Save our ostriches. Safe and effective. We're all in it together. Can't wait for the next 3 million pages. Because I don't think there's going to be any charges between now and the release of the next tranche. Pretty damn sure. I just hope whatever happens between now and then, nothing gets out of any of these other private, seedy, back alley biolabs.
They both look clean, but the guest list redacted, if you know what I mean. No files exist, just a little twist, nothing to see here. Move along, folks, the truth's in the vault with the dirty jokes. No names released, justice deceased to protect the victims. And Donald Trump, shh, don't say the name, you'll get dumped. They dance with the girls too young to vote, a private jet and a suicide note. One's in a grave, the other still tweets. The truth took a dive 6,000 feet. The cameras broke, that's not a joke. The guards were napping, the logs were gone, and everyone smiled like nothing's wrong. Nobody talks, just shadow walks. National security took the stage while justice quietly disengaged. We can't release the names to protect the victims. And also Donald Trump. Coincidence? Just dumb luck. Right? Another sealed file. That crocodile smile. We did our best, says the DOJ, while the truth just fades away. Another new spin. No one will win except the rich guys with gold ID cards and closets full of secrets behind steel bars. Just a little glitch, a billionaire's privilege. That's the sound of the case closed.
So there is other news going on. David Eby, who just made headlines calling Alberta separatists treasonous, making headlines again, this time on the extortion story. out of really centered around Surrey, but it's involving other communities too. Says members of parliament must close loopholes that allow extortion suspects to claim refugee status. Must close corrosive loopholes that allow suspects in extortion-related shootings to apply for refugee status, as the paralyzing situation undermines public confidence and commerce. There have been dozens of shootings aimed at business members of the South Asian community since the new year in Surrey, BC, and EB says the loopholes need to be quickly shut to help police in their investigations. So this is a growing concern out there and nationwide, with the mayor of Surrey, BC, calling for the federal government to declare some sort of national emergency. They're that concerned about it in Surrey, British Columbia. And I know that they have had protests, demonstrations out in BC related to this. I'll show you. Right here. Global.
These demonstrators say they are frustrated by ongoing extortion-related violence.
We are standing here in a rain to just asking and requesting our governments, all three-level governments, please address this issue very seriously.
They have to protect not only the people live there, also the business.
This rally comes just one day after this home on Crescent Road near 132nd Street was shot up and a small fire was ignited by the fence. Officers on patrol found an abandoned suspect vehicle. Police say the suspect got into a rideshare vehicle and was stopped about 20 minutes later.
All three are foreign nationals. We're still working to confirm some of those details, and it's our understanding that CBSA have now started their own independent investigation into their status in Canada.
Okay. So, yeah, they've made some arrests, but this is a much larger issue than the one incident. And we'll be hearing more about it. Probably touch on it more again in the nights ahead. Just make sure I'm not missing anything before I get to, oh yeah, there's this story too that I know is going to just enrage some people, but I think it shows that something different is happening in Parliament right now, which again, not going to comment too much on it tonight or touch on it too much, but federal NDP torches Ontario NDPs Dolly Begum for joining Carney's Liberals. Yeah, the federal NDP not happy with this lady, Ontario NDP, member of provincial parliament, Dolly Begum, because she is going to run in the riding in a by-election, which has been vacated by former MP Bill Blair. Because Blair, what's he doing? He took an appointment to, what was it? Just within the last couple of days. Yeah, High Commissioner for Canada in the United Kingdom. That's going to be his new role. So they lose that seat, even though they've had floor crossings. It gets them one MP further away from a majority government. And so they have to get this by-election past them, and they're going to try and regain the seat, but with, I guess, this new Democrat. Interesting, too, that this is coming after you've seen Conservatives cross the floor to join the Liberals. Plus, you then saw the Conservatives yesterday, table a motion to expedite Mark Carney's GST, HST tax break so that it's going to pass very quickly. I don't know if it was dealt with today or not. I haven't checked, but that was a Conservative motion try to push forward more quickly a liberal initiative, and then everybody voted unanimously in favor of it. And now you have a new Democrat who's joining the liberals to run as a candidate who could end up sitting in Parliament as a liberal MP. So it's something's afoot as we see this blending of MPs within the liberal government. Again, you could look at this a couple of different ways, at least. But we'll dig into it more in the nights ahead. More importantly, and this, really I wish we'd been able to kind of deal with closer to the top of the broadcast, but maybe fitting that we deal with it closer to the end tonight in a way. Okay, even before I get to the Preddy thing, this is also weird. Just freaking weird. Different story. Almost forgot about it. First Lady Jill Biden's ex-husband has been arrested and charged with killing his current wife. Okay, I told you this was weird news. Jill Biden's ex-husband charged with murder.
Department telling us, quote, will not be providing.
A man believed to be former First Lady Jill Biden's ex-husband has been charged with murder. He's accused of killing his wife. Chief Washington correspondent Mike Emanuel has the latest on this. Mike.
Harris, 77-year-old William Stevenson was arrested yesterday and charged in connection with the death of 64-year-old Linda Stevenson on December 28th. There are reports William Stevenson is the ex-husband of former First Lady Jill Biden, but Fox has not independently confirmed that. The New Castle, Delaware Police Department telling us, quote, will not be providing any additional comment regarding this incident when asked if they can confirm the connection to Dr. Biden. The charge in this case is first-degree murder. William Stevenson has been arraigned and is being held in the Howard County Correctional Institution after failing to post a $500,000 cash bail. Delaware authorities say local police responded to a reported domestic dispute on Sunday, December 28th at 11:16 p.m. Investigators say they found Linda Stevenson unresponsive in the living room. Officers immediately tried life-saving measures, but she was later pronounced dead. The woman's body has been turned over to the Delaware Medical Examiner, where an autopsy was expected to be conducted to determine the cause and manner of her death. Obviously, breaking details in this case, an arrest just made yesterday. We are digging into the facts of it and still trying to firm up the link between this man and former First Lady Jill Biden.
And there are many reports out there now saying that it is Jill Biden's ex-husband. You know what? I'm going to go right now, and just because it's been an hour or two. Yeah. Reported by BBC, CNN, People Magazine, Global, NBC, TMZ, New York Times, ABC 7, New York, USA Today, New York Post. It's everywhere. Weird. I think that's weird. It's not standard practice. Okay, let's get to this Alex Preddy story. His cause of death has been released by the medical examiner. And what we know, the killing of this 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse was that he was fatally shot by federal agents. And the word they're using is homicide. I have the report right here. Right there. Hennepin County Medical Examiner. Scroll down. Alex Jeffrey Preddy, born 1988. Date of death, January 24th, 2026, 37 years old. Divorced. Manner of death, homicide. Cause of death, multiple gunshot wounds. I saw it. Now, that's not a court ruling. That's a medical examiner using the word homicide. I believe the evidence shows that there may have been as many as 10 shots fired in his back and the back of his head. I saw it. It's the Gulf of Mexico. And it's very real. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back. Something more about those mice I want to share with you on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So I was thinking about the mice, those lab mice. Everybody loves the ostriches, right? Because they're, I guess, kind of cuter. Nobody gives a damn about the mice. Well, some people do, maybe. Mice can be kind of cute, though. And then I was thinking, what could I say about the mice tonight? These mice that, for human beings, actually do so much and sacrifice so much, suffer so much. We certainly abuse mice, don't we? I do. I catch them in traps. I have to. They get into my house, they'll destroy everything. But then I started to think about mice, information overload. And I got to thinking too about the current state of politics, how truth is elusive, and how we have this unapologetic conservative culture that's out there that, I, as a conservative, have found has led people astray so that while they're calling themselves conservatives, they're really not at all. Then I started thinking about these mice, the politics, and that brought back memories of Andrew Dice Clay because I was thinking about Hickory Dickory Dock. Are you familiar with Andrew Dice Clay? You remember the comedian who rocketed to stardom in the 1980s? He used shock value or shock humor to pull in an audience. And he became incredibly successful, was able to fill stadiums, even Madison Square Gardens. At one time, I think, he had a crowd of like up to 80,000 people with a profanity-laced act and his Andrew Dice Clay character that he played, smoking the cigarette and telling his jokes with that thick Brooklyn accent. And I mentioned about unapologetically conservative. That's the slogan that I mentioned probably a couple of weeks ago. That I said, no, it's the wrong thing to be focused on. As a conservative, I'm not apologizing for anything. I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but it's still a mistake. Because Andrew Dice Clay rocketed up and he was a shooting star. For a while, he was very successful, and then he kind of crashed and burned because he was unapologetic. In fact, in 1993, he went on a tour called the No Apologies Tour. After his other tour, his other thing called Dice Rules. Dice Rules. No apologies. It was a whole series of sketches, acts, raunchy. Do you remember? I'm afraid to even recite some of what he used to say. It was very, very graphic, and people laughed. I remember I never really liked the guy. But I had friends who thought that he was just it for a while. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of, and you probably maybe know the rest. And then he's got the I'll do the censorship version. Hickory dickory dock, some chick was sucking my. The clock struck 2. I dumped the on the next block. Ha ha ha. I don't smoke. See, the thing about being unapologetic is you don't know when to quit sometimes, right? And he didn't know when to quit. I think he's permanently banned. We got permanently banned from one of the awards shows. I think MTV was lifetime ban because he just kept going. Didn't know when enough was enough. And he fell out of favor. And he's nowhere near as popular now. He still has a following, but the point is, people just got tired of it after a while. Just got tired of it. Unapologetic. That's the danger for a lot of people right now. I think they're on the bandwagon, riding this, what they think is a crest of support and popularity in what has become sort of, I think, a fascistic populist movement, which I hate to even say, but it's true. As they stare into that deep, dark abyss and get sucked right down inside because they're taking the bait, making the mistake. and they think it's okay, but it's not. But it still gives me, in a way, hope, because I can see that this is not going to last. People don't want this. They don't want what Trump is doing. They don't want this authoritarian approach. Really, in the end, they're not going to want it. Even though the wool is being pulled over many people's eyes, the truth is right there in front of you. Straight line. The truth isn't really going to be that elusive in the end. People are going to know. They're going to figure it out. Because the truth is going to come along and just smack everybody right in the head when we suffer enough from it. Because we've made this mistake in trusting where we shouldn't have trusted, but we're not really entirely to blame because we've been deceived and manipulated in a tsunami of information. Too much information. While being told, don't you dare let your government censor you. I don't want censorship, but I don't want to be manipulated either. And I don't really have the answers to this problem tonight. I just recognize the problem, but that's the first step in fixing it, I suppose. And we need to address it. That's part of what I'm doing right now. See how these mice can teach us such important lessons? You know, after all the flashlights and the hazmat suits and the lockdown corridors we just covered in this biolab raid story tonight, I can't help but think of an old story most of us heard as kids. Aesop's Lion and the Mouse. You know it. A huge lion is sleeping in the sun. A tiny mouse accidentally runs across his paw and wakes him up. The lion pins the mouse under one massive claw, ready to end it all. And the little mouse looks up and says, "Please spare me. One day I might be able to repay the kindness." And the lion laughs, really laughs, at the idea that something so small could ever help a king of beasts. But he's in a good mood, so he lets the mouse go. Okay. Be free. Time passes. The lion gets caught in a hunter's net. Ropes everywhere, no way out. He roars, he struggles, but he's trapped. He cannot get out. And then who shows up? That same little mouse. Without hesitation, he starts gnawing through the thick ropes, one strand at a time, slowly, steadily. He cuts the lion free. The lion stands up, shakes off the last bits of the net, looks down at the mouse, and finally understands. The moral that Aesop left us is simple. No act of kindness is ever wasted. And the smallest among us can change everything. We talk a lot here, I do anyway, about freedom, like real freedom. Not the bastardized version that seems to have emerged of late. The bastardized definition, the hijacked definition, which is not freedom at all. The word has been used, I think, by many people and abused to hide true intent. But anyway, we do talk a lot about it here. I so want it back. It's right there. And when we talk about freedom here, so often I know that, well, I just end up talking about how it's usually the misfits, the overlooked, the so-called little guys who end up holding the line when the big systems tighten. Especially when the Decepticons emerge from the shadows presenting themselves as something they're not, using that word freedom or I'm a freedom fighter when they're just the opposite. It's the little guys who end up holding the line. Sometimes it's not the loudest roar or the heaviest boot breaks the trap. Sometimes it's just one determined, underestimated soul who refuses to quit chewing. So tonight, whatever cage or net you feel closing in, whether it's out there in the world or just in your own head, remember that mouse. We'll call him Marvin. He didn't need size. He didn't need permission. He just needed to keep going. That's what we'll do when we return tomorrow. We'll keep on going together at 7 p.m. Eastern on the flip side. See you then.
I heard old Cosmo howling last night up on the hill where the moon shines so bright. He was singing a tune, lonesome dogs cry about freedom, running and touching the sky. If I leave here tomorrow, won't you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. Cosmo's got them paws that just itch to roam. He's chasing his dreams, he's far from home. With a heart full of love and a spirit so free, he's living his life wild and carefree. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a blur. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. Now the night's getting cold and the sky's turning gray, but Cosmo's still out there, he's miles away. He's not looking back, he's got his path to tread. With every step, he's leaving his path. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. So if you're feeling lost, just think of Cosmo's run. Remember his spirit, his freedom, his fun. And maybe one day, when you're feeling low, you'll find your own freedom and let your spirit go. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a bird. A heart full of love and a spirit so free. He's living his life wild and carefree. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard a bird. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.